This is the new EPZ K9 and it looks very pretty and it also sounds very pretty. It has this sweet, delicate and nicely balanced playback, but with also a little coloration just like the middle of the plating. For those who like the clean EW300 or the EM6L, the K9 would be the direct upgrade to those in terms of the sound and also technical performance. It actually sounds very similar to the EM6L, but just less shouty in the upper mids, less boosted, a little more detailed and resolving, and slightly sharper in the imaging. The K9's tonality is balanced, all-rounded, but ever so slightly V-shaped in a good way and very sweet sounding. I found the extra energy in the mid bass and the treble really helps the K9 from becoming, just another safe all-rounder that you kind of forget, because its slight coloration adds that, engagement and musicality to the listening experience while still striking a fine balance. The bass is snappy, it's punchy, it's well controlled. It also has that like natural note weight and body to the vocals and drums from the filled in mid bass. There's also like a solid kick and thump to the drums, but just like quick enough to not become muddy or bleed into the mid-range. The extra mid-bass in this case is nicely balanced out and harmonious with the 1 to 4K region to create like this extension and clarity in the vocals. Female vocals sounds very good in these without being like thin and shouty because of that extra mid-bass. In terms of the treble, the K9 is nicely extended with like a slight airiness to the cymbals without becoming too soft or too sharp. It's not going to be the most dynamic and contrasty or sparkly IEM, nor is it going to be the smoothest like the EM6L or the Supernova, but it does strike a nice balance between the two and you get a bit of both worlds. Tech wise, the K9 sits around the Pilgrim and the DUSK level, which is solid and respectable for its price because it is $50 to $100 cheaper than the other two, and it is a step up when it comes to technicality and detail versus its younger brother the P50, which is more neutral, more like vocal focus, but less balanced overall in the bass and the treble. Now when it comes to value, the K9 is pretty solid. The design is pretty, there's a black version as well, and you do get a nice cable and case. The accessories are good as well. Now is it a market breaker in terms of price to performance? No, it's slightly more resolving than the EM6L, which you can get for under like $100 on sale, so 2 times cheaper than the K9. However, tonality wise, the K9 is more natural and less shouty than the EM6L. Basically, you're paying for a better overall package with a slight bump all around when it comes to the tonality, the timbre, the performance, and the accessories compared to the EM6L. Or if you're looking to upgrade from the clean or EW300, this is the next step up to those. Genre-wise, the K9 is an all-rounder, so it basically works for anything. I don't really have a favorite per se, maybe R&B or indie, but you can basically hit shuffle and be fine with like any other like genre. Similarly, tip wise, anything works, maybe for the exception of clarions because it does have enough energy and liveliness already. I am using the clear stock tips that it comes with. These are basically the software ultra clears. They sound great, just smooth enough without gimping the dynamics. Now if you want more low end, you can go the Velvet to Venus or those stock tips that a lot of companies use, or you can go the Senkai's as well if you want a smoother upper mid sound. But basically those will only change the sound a little and you're gonna be fine tip wise. It's pretty like flexible when it comes to that. But I will say like when it comes to the fit, the edge here does get a little bit like uncomfortable and it does stab into my ears with like prolonged use. So if you had prior issues with like the edges like sticking out on other IEMs, the K9 is no different here. In terms of scaling, the K9 is a mid-volume set around 60 to 65 dBs on more energetic genres like K-pop, J-pop, like Yoshika, Luna, EDM. Those are gonna get a bit fatiguing at higher volumes, whereas some other stuff like rock and metal, the upper mids can get a little bit like shouty and just like too much when you try to crank it up. So for those genres, this is like a mid-volume set. On the other hand, R&B and slower stuff like indie, ballads, acoustics will all scale a lot better to around like 75 dBs or so depending on the songs, with the vocals being very clear, very sweet, and you get like that slight glimmer and air in the treble. It's just enough. As for some comparisons versus the Astrals, the K9 has a more vocal-centric and mid-range approach. It has more forward when it comes to that. It also has more emphasis in the mid-bass as well, a little bit more natural sounding, less, I guess, vibrant and less exciting, which makes it better when it comes to ballads, slow rock, indie, stuff like that. Female artists sound very clean, very angelic on the K9, whereas the Astral is less mid-range focused. It has a more sub-bass and airy presentation and makes it better for hip-hop and especially more energetic genres like rock or metal because it does have a tamer upper mids region compared to the K9. Tech-wise, both are around the same when it comes to the detail and resolution, with the exception being that the low-end texture is slightly better on the Astrals, and it does have a little more airiness and slightly more like decay in the treble, whereas the imaging is going to be slightly sharper on the K9 with a little bit more slam and body to the drums. So depending on your library, both are a great pick and they're both worth the price at $300. Then versus the Odysseys, the K9's vocals are again more forward and more mid-range focused with a smoother playback in general, whereas the Odysseys have a bassier presentation. It has more focus in the low end. The texture is slightly better on the Odysseys when it comes to the sub bass, and also scales better than the K9s as well. Performance wise, the K9 has a slight edge over the Odysseys when it comes to the clarity and the treble extension, treble detail. It is more expensive at around $300, so it does check out. But if you listen at mid volume, or if you have a lot of like vocal centric tracks, you want a clean sound while not sacrificing the bass, then the K9s would be the better pick for that. Whereas if you listen louder and you want a more immersive experience, you know, your library has more hip hop, it has more rock, then the Odysseys are great for that. Now, compared to some bassier sets like the T Pros, Type 4, Estrella, Punch, Martillo, the K9 is just less bassy. Obviously, it has a cleaner sound, there's less quantity in the low end, it's better balanced, tighter in the low end, less thick, less impactful, not as rumbly, but a lot more mid-range focus, cleaner, you know, better vocals, and that would be the better pick if you like a more clean and more all-rounded presentation. Whereas if you like a bassier presentation but still somewhat, you know, balanced, then the Estrella, the Hype 4, the T Pros will give you a much more engaging low-end playback when it comes to the texture and the quantity. When it comes to hip-hop, rap, R&B, EDM, the Estrella, Hype 4, T Pros are all going to be better for that. And if you're a bass head, obviously the Punch and the Martillos just have a lot more bass. It's gonna like scratch that itch for the bass heads. More energy, more slam, more rumble, more extension, just like a lot more engaging than the K9s, which is like more all-rounded. So go check out the Martillo reviews if you need more info on that. Next, versus some more neutral sets like the DUSK, Pilgrim, 5+2, Canon Pro, I like the K9s more than all of them because they're all mid-volume sets, and the extension in the upper mids on the K9 just feels more complete, more natural at mid volume. It might be an issue if you crank it up because it does have more upper mids in them, but since these are all mid volume sets, this is the better tonality to me. You hear the nuances better on the K9 when it comes to vocals, whereas the others are just like a little bit gimped in the upper mids, just a cut, and it's pushed back and not as full and natural sounding as the K9 when it comes to the vocals. Because these are also around the same detail wise as the DUSK, Pilgrim, and Canon Pro, but for like $50 to $100 less, and much better than the 5+2 tonality wise, and slightly more detailed than the 5+2. So unless you want a tamer low end or looking for like a more neutral kind of sound, more relaxing, I would just grab the K9 because to me it does feel more natural and the better all-rounder in most cases. Now compared to the EM10, the K9 to me sounds more natural and less shouty in the vocals. It's fuller in the body, the no way, the lower mids, the mid bass is more filled in, and the EM10 in comparison almost sounds a little bit V-shaped even though it's basically Harman. But it's got more upper mids, more treble, also has more sub bass, so it does sound more exciting than the K9, and also has a little more detail and quicker when it comes to the attack decay, a little bit better in the separation. However, as an all-rounder, I still do prefer the K9 just because it's not as shouty and it's fuller than the EM10s. The EM10s can come across a little bit like thin sometimes depending on the tip you use. To most people, I think you're gonna like the K9s a little bit more than the EM10, even though it's not as detailed. Now, upgrade wise, if you found the Nova, Chopin, or Super Mix 4 to be a little bit shouty or like a little bit thin in the mid bass, then the K9 fixes all that with like a more natural timbre while being a little more detailed than the Nova and around the same as the Chopin or Super Mix 4. So value wise, it's not gonna beat the Super Mix 4 or Chopin like just pure performance to like money, but the overall package is more refined in the sound and just the build and accessories as well. All in all, the K9 is a very solid all-rounder. If you're looking to upgrade from the Clean or the EW300, this is gonna be like a cleaner and more detailed version of those with better accessories, better build as well. It's still musical, but also well balanced and versatile at the same time. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of these. If you have them, comment down below. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll see everyone in the next video.
Shout out to Roark's Cat, Dom Q, Discal Scottus, B Urak, Mystic Spoon Attack, Walker Standard, User, Patrick, Polly J, Mr. Gabrielas, Giseng Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, Obi, Wizard, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapas Art, Shin Bakle, Choconorris, FKSRG, Treble Will Extended, Cousin Fat Fat, O'Reilly, Julius, Dead Riddle, Bilha, Tamat, Ardmore, 777ZK, Jasper, Nicholas, Dribbless, Parham, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Addy, Brandon, Syracuse, Wayu, Harder, Michael, Jacob, and Danor. Thank you guys so much.